Hey everybody, video here for you today. Now I'm just putting my own intro onto a podcast I did with Ben at UnchartedX and Kyle and Russ, the Snake Brothers, the Brothers of the Serpent Podcast. This was a fun one to do at the end of last week. I think this is the 5th time Ben and I have done a podcast together, and the first time I met Kyle and Russ, which was very cool. I have listened to them many times on Randall Carlson's Kosmographia podcast and also their own podcast channel. Now, by the time I get around to uploading this, I'm sure a lot of you have already checked this out on Ben's channel. I know the Brothers of the Serpent are going to be uploading this to their channel, and I want my subs to go over there and check out their channel. They have a lot of very interesting guests. They had George Howard on recently. They've had Randall on. They've had Ben on, and a lot of fascinating subjects, and it's one of the channels that I listen to on a regular basis, so go check them out and give them a sub right now. I will leave the link for Kyle and Russ's Brothers of the Serpent podcast channel, and I know just about all you are familiar with Ben's UnchartedX channel. I knew Ben would have an outstanding channel, and that's why I gave him a shout out when he had just 41 subs and was just starting out. But in this video, we talk about the Khafre Pyramid, the middle pyramid of Giza, and I call it the Mountain of the West right at the beginning. And I really didn't elaborate on that, but I just think that's their symbolic representation in stone of their afterlife beliefs, ascension. That's about the simplest way I can put it, but here is that podcast now. Hope you all enjoy it, and go check it out on Ben's channel and Brothers of the Serpent when they get it uploaded. I'm not sure when that'll be, but it'll be pretty soon. So here is that 2-hour podcast. Ben, Kyle, Russ, this is fun to do. If you are not subscribed to my channel, please hit the subscribe button. I think this is the 3rd time in 1,700 videos I've asked people to subscribe to my channel, just because I'm inching close to 100,000. That'll be a cool milestone to go over. But here is that podcast. Hope to do more of these in the future. And those of you who want to see Matt from Ancient Architects involved, well, I bug him all the time to do something like this. So here is that podcast. Hope you enjoy it, and you all have a very nice day.
All right, well, hello everyone. Ben from UnchartedX here, doing another Swapcast with a couple of my favorite other broadcasters that talk about these things. We've got the Kyle and Russ, the Brothers of the Serpent. Hey guys.
How's it going? Yep, happy to be here.
Good stuff. And also happy to have Cfapps 7865 Chuck in the channel. How's it going, Chuck?
Great, glad to be here, Ben. Ready to talk.
Good stuff. Yeah, we did one of these the other week, and I think it went down pretty well, and we'd planned to revisit a few of these sites, and we've got sort of an interesting one to get to today, the second pyramid at Giza. Yeah, it should be an interesting little journey inside and out.
Excellent. Yeah, they have multiple names for it, right? It's Khafre or
Chefren. Yep. Khafre, as Yusuf would say. Khafre. Yeah, whether you like it, if you like it.
I prefer to call it the Mountain of the West, because I think that's what it's called in the ancient text.
Mountain of
and
the
that's
West.
What I look at a lot when looking at. Yep, the Mountain of the West. Yep.
I like that name.
Where's the source for that? Is that a term
the
you've
book
come up
of
with?
Coming Forth by Day, one of them. No, it's a very interesting thing, because down at Abydos, they talk about the very same thing, the Mountain of the West, and there's actually a mountain down there called the Mountain of Anubis. And there's a very strange tomb and a shaft that goes like, I think, 1/8 of a mile underneath that mountain.
Wow.
And then there's a huge granite box down there. It's kind of like the same story that we have at Giza almost, with the Osiris shaft in the Mountain of the West.
Okay.
And there's just a lot of correlations, and of course it says Anubis guards the sacred Mountain of the West, and
Yeah.
that's what I look at, what the Egyptians tell us was going on there.
Yeah, right, because there's not a whole lot of references to pyramids otherwise, specifically anyway, in a lot of the literature. Okay, and just one more thing I wanted to mention real quickly before we dive into this is that I know Chuck, his channel, if people aren't subscribed to Chuck's channel, or the Brothers of the Serpent for that matter, go and subscribe. But Chuck's approaching a big milestone too. It's Cfapps 7865, 99,000 subs, nearly at 100. So congrats on the 99, and let's see if we can get you over that hundreds.
Congratulations, man. Yeah.
It's pretty incredible. It's pretty incredible. I remember I was blown away when I got to 1,000. I thought, wow, how the heck could I ever get 1,000? And now, about 6 years later, the ball just keeps on rolling, I guess.
Good stuff. Yeah, good stuff. All right, let me share screen here and hopefully make all this little technology work for us. There we go. All right, you guys can see that?
Yep, looks good.
So we'll just get into it. There's I'll let this roll in the background. We've got a few different segments to go through. I think initially this first part we're going to look at some of the features outside of the pyramid, but I kind of wanted to set some context with this footage about where it and how it sits at Giza, where it is in relation to all the other monuments and things that people know about on that site. So this is approaching, I guess, from you can see the Valley Temple here and the head of the Sphinx poking up. You've got the Great Pyramid, and then obviously the second pyramid, the Mountain of the West, is in the middle, and then a little further to the left you have the third major pyramid at Giza. But it's this structure to me is, I don't know, it's interesting. I actually, we'll get into it in a little bit, but I think there's a chance that the chronology may be a little different to how we think it is. I think there's a chance that this second pyramid could have actually been the initial pyramid. There's a lot of things about it that sort of make me think it's perhaps older, not the least of which it's the one in the middle. It's the one that's connected to the Sphinx, which there's an awful lot of evidence suggesting that that's older than the dynastic Egyptians. It's connected by that causeway.
When you and Jimmy and George and those guys were walking around, was there a distinct difference is there a distinct difference, or is it just kind of little hints? That's what I was wondering about.
There's some specific differences with the second pyramid that I think that are different to the Great Pyramid. For one, it's far more megalithic, and we'll see this. The blocks in its structure are larger. That's not to say that there aren't large blocks in the Great Pyramid. Certainly, the granite blocks in the King's Chamber, like 70 tons. But you have blocks in the masonry of the second pyramid, and you'll see this on the bottom courses, that are way bigger than the blocks that you see in the Great Pyramid. It seems like they use slightly smaller blocks. They're still like 2 or 3 ton blocks, but you've got ones, I think, in this second pyramid here that could be 15, 20, 25 tons, maybe even heavier. Things like that. And it's also, I look at it as like a little bit kind of logically is the other thing too. Like the internal structure is not as complicated as the Great Pyramid, and it's also a little bit smaller. So it's like what really would come first if you were following a typical sort of natural progression of the building and learning. If you were building one structure, maybe you were going to build the next one. I'm not sure the first one you'd build would be the greatest one of all. Like I guess that's the some of the logic behind it too.
Yeah, the thing I just kind of get to when figuring out the age of this, would a 4th dynasty king put a massive pyramid into a necropolis that was already there? Because some of those tombs go back further than Khufu in the 4th dynasty. Would they have put a massive pyramid in the middle of a necropolis, or would a necropolis get built around sacred old structures?
Yeah.
And there is one answer that is just totally obvious to me.
Yeah, I would agree.
So the video here is you're zooming in and out on the casing stones that are still at the top of the second pyramid. And one question I've always had is how is it that they're still up there? Like what's holding them basically? Why don't they fall down? They're basically fixed into the underlying structure, right? That's why they're still there. Otherwise, they would just fall down.
Yeah, so they are. There's the back end of them are wedged in, and it is all. There's no mortar in it. They are wedged into place there, and as you said, it's the top sort of third of it, or the top, I guess 20-25% of it has the casing stone still on it, and they're remarkable. These are the fine Tura limestone. All these casing stones came from different quarry. But I'm not sure exactly how they're still up there. It's actually remarkable that they're still there, after being, I guess, shaken around. And then they think that the reason that some of them are out of place is due to minor earthquakes. The pyramidion on top is missing, But yeah, this is the best. I think this is the prettiest pyramid, really, because it gives you a good indication of. You get just a little sense of what it might have been like, all of these having the two pyramids cased in this type of limestone.
Yeah. Well, just because this sounds a bit silly when you first hear it, but the fact that those casing stones are still up there, has made me wonder if they started from the top in installing them, because it's almost like a paint job. You start from the top and paint your way towards the floor, right? Because because if you started building them up from the bottom, and then let's say you get 2/3 of the way up, and then somebody drops a block and it goes sliding all the way down, damaging all the casing stones all the way down. You start from the top and go and work your way down.
Right,
that won't happen.
You can't damage it.
And the fact that they're still up there at the very top implies that they can be built that way. As long as they can. The lower one.
It's very interesting you say that, because I believe either on that pyramid or the Great Pyramid, they did dating on the mortar, some of the mortar that was somewhere around there, and they found that the top of it was older than the bottom.
That's right. That's the other thing that has made me wonder about it. Some of the stuff has made it seem like the top is older, and I'm like, well, yeah, when you're doing the finishing out, the final polishing of the whole structure, you start at the top and work your way down. And I don't know.
Right. It's a good point. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know the blocks do get smaller, so the courses they get smaller as it goes higher. So the bigger courses there is actually, and it's funny. There's also a little bit of imprecision in this one relative to the Great Pyramid. It's a very slight twist to it because it's not perfectly square. It sort of twists just a tiny bit. And then the courses get smaller, and then there's a notable layer in the middle somewhere in these courses of where they leveled it perfectly. So they kind of build up, and then they leveled it perfectly, kind of halfway up, and then kind of built on top of it again, like the structure itself. The case, I think the casing stones, maybe they started from the top down, but there's a couple of oddities about its construction. But
the other thing,
what about those? What about those casing stones compared to the casing stones on the Bend Pyramid? Is there a difference? Seems to me, remembering old footage, it seems the Bend Pyramid is a little different, the way those casing stones are kind of locked into place.
Those are definitely, that's why I think, they're really, there's an angle to those that it's just from memory that, I mean, if you look closely, I don't know, you can sort of see how it's been wedged in on top of the masonry block, so it's sort of being held in by pressure, and then I guess the ones on the bottom where it's fallen off are supported by something beneath them. But the bent pyramid has more of an angle to the joinery, I guess, and we'd have to look at some footage of it, and that's why there's so much of that casing stone still on there.
Yeah, and the area that you were highlighting with the mouse just a moment ago, where it breaks off right there, that looks, I mean, there's some shear walls there that look pretty big.
Yeah.
What's the distance, do you think?
Yeah. Some of them are pretty big. See, there's some blocks standing up underneath them here.
Yes.
And I know there's some of this is probably modern repair, to be honest. So you do.
Yeah, there's definitely quarry. You could tell people were cutting that stuff right there at the top.
Yeah.
Quarry.
We'll get to the quarrying. There's an awful lot of talk about when it comes to quarrying here. And this has been hacked off here. But so some of these vertical blocks you see, probably some of that maybe even modern repair. And you see this at the bottom too, and they do a good job of kind of disguising it, making it look like limestone, but there's actually quite a bit of modern concrete. They're trying, I mean, it's good, keep them from deteriorating further. But there may be a little bit of that going on. It's a remarkable piece of, I mean, the Great Pyramid kind of gets all of the attention, but, this is the second biggest, the second largest, second tallest, and the second in terms of mass. It's steeper than the Great Pyramid by about 2 degrees, and it's only about 3 meters shorter. So what's that? 9-10 feet shorter. Yeah. It's because it's steeper. It has considerably less mass. You can kind of sense the difference in the pitch here. You can see that it's. And this is from what they call the viewing platform. This photo, so it's a picture of the Great Pyramid and the Second Pyramid. They drive the buses up around here, and it's another vendor attack location. Well, they'll come at you with all of the shiny wares that you can purchase. But
So it looks like right there in the midsection below the casing stones, but there's like this clean level where you can see the stair stepping
yeah,
very clearly. Any ideas what's going on there? Why is it
Yeah, why is it more? I
It-
don't know. It's
cleaner?
yeah.
yeah, maybe they've just taken the casing stones off here and they didn't. It was a little too high up to just be quarrying regular limestone, because there's definitely, like, as we go around it, I don't know if this might be the face here. You can't see it from this angle, but there's like big divots. Like you can see this huge big sort of where a large amount of material has been removed from the side of it, because it has been, you know, extensively quarried, as well as going through earthquakes over millennia. But yeah,
I cannot imagine the thinking behind. I mean, I don't know. I can't get my mind around the idea of like, oh yeah, let's go get stone off of that. You know, like,
right.
I can't imagine doing that.
Yeah, well,
Is there local legend, Ben, where that stone went?
I mean, there's a ton of it. The limestone in particular, there's a ton of it that's made out, like some of the structures in Cairo, like a lot of buildings and stuff, the mosques and whatnot. There's a lot
The
of
Mosque of Muhammad Ali. I think I did a video on
Yeah.
that about 3 years ago, where they pretty much know for sure, but that's a lot of limestone there.
This is like from the base of the third pyramid, kind of panning around. There's a lot of limestone and a lot of granite too. That's the other thing. As we go around the outside of this, the bottom two courses, at least the bottom one, I think the bottom two were cased in granite, Aswan granite. And we'll get to talk about the sort of the ridiculous claims about quarrying in the Old Kingdom, just when you get it's just a look at like how much granite's laying around. And this is the offcuts from quarrying that began, I mean, as far as we know, in the 19th dynasty. Again, Ramses II. In fact, it's written on the wall of the enclosure in the pyramid that the overseer of the quarry was quarrying the granite of this pyramid for Ramses II for a temple at Heliopolis. So, yeah, there's so much.
Do you
to
know
see.
that one of the? I'm sorry to talk over you, but one of
go
the
ahead.
6th dynasty pyramids, I think down at Abu Sir, they have stone from the causeway all the way, you know, right in the 6th dynasty down there.
I didn't know.
And
that.
they would do that to attach themselves to the gods. Now,
Right.
are they considering people just a few centuries before them gods, or something that came way before?
Yeah, I mean, 4th dynasties, like that's
A lot
like
of mystery.
Yeah.
a few. Yeah, that's not that long before these guys, because that's the other part about all of this. I mean, all of these mega pyramids, you know, from Abu al-Wash and well, just the sites you've got this, you've got Zaywed El Aren, you've got Dashur, you've got Giza. You're talking about a period of about 100 to 120, 30 years where they supposedly built all of these. And not only that,
And a
but they.
huge,
Sorry, go ahead, Chuck.
huge difference in those.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, big period. I mean, so Khufu was supposedly. Khafre was supposedly Khufu's son, or perhaps his brother. I think he was his son, and so
Yeah,
you know
he
you've got
was.
these successive generations of these kings that then in their lifetime built these structures. And so what I want to look at now, before we get into the pyramid itself and then walk around it, I've got some footage of some of the structures that are connected to it. So you'd call it sort of part of the pyramid structure itself, because, you know, everyone talks about the pyramid itself, but when you look at just how much work and stonework and masonry was involved, not only in the pyramid, but in the foundation, plus all of the structures around it. You've got these huge structures that were built just around these pyramids, causeways. You know, there's a tremendous amount of stuff that went on, you know, not just in the pyramid. You have a huge amount of work in all of the structures around it, and it's all the same sort of massive megalithic granite. In fact, this is out the front of the second pyramid, just to the side of the causeway. The structure behind this footage is what they'd call the pyramid temple, or it's just the actual structure that was built that's on the causeway that leads down to the Sphinx, and then they have the valley temple. You know, most pyramids have that set up where you have a pyramid, you have what they call a temple, but there's a structure at the pyramid, there's a causeway, and then a valley temple or a structure down the bottom, and then same thing here. But there's some really awesome, people sort of skip this, I don't often see it, but there's, just from a granite perspective, I really like some of these curved pieces that are here. that were part of like the balustrade or whatever. This is called commonly sort of called the couch block because you kind of sit on it, and as tourists sit on it, and it kind of looks like a couch. But
yeah, is that the one? I think Dunn mentions this in his latest book, right? Chris Dunn.
Yep. Yeah, he does. Yeah, Chris Dunn talks about these pieces. They're there's no straight cuts here. There's you can't sort of you can't hollow out that inside cut with a saw or a blade or grinding it out. And then it's when you get to look at it, it's remarkably regular. Like when you look at it at the end. And a couple other things to note with the quality of the granite that you have here is these large chunks of feldspar and mica and quartz that are in it. This isn't.
Is that, Ben, is that proven to be from Aswan, the same as in like the King's Chamber? Have they done tests on some of that out there?
This is Aswan granite. I don't know if they've tested this specifically. This piece here isn't. This is a different type, but in general, mostly they attribute pretty much all of the pink granite to Aswan. I haven't heard of too many other cases where they talk about like the pink granite coming from other quarries. There's definitely been other quarries for other types of granite, but most of the pink stuff they say is Aswan granite. I don't know if it's been tested specifically. But so this kind of leads me to that discussion around quarrying and the Old Kingdom. So it's still orthodox. It's still part of the regular story that they will and it's not really talked about much, but they don't believe that the Old Kingdom Egyptians had the ability to quarry granite because they didn't have the iron tools. It's too hard to get the stuff out, and you can just see how beautiful that and smooth it is, and then how straight that line is. Like it's not there's no visible imperfections to it. And they the Orthodox story says that the Old Kingdom, all of the granite works from the Old Kingdom, they weren't quarrying that stone. They were finding it in surface boulders and in other, just like pieces of granite that were laying around. Which is, ask any geologist who then looks at this stone and ask them if that's surface granite, and they'll probably laugh at you. It's, to get large pieces that Old Kingdom had massive columns. You've got 70-ton blocks. You've got even bigger pieces from the Old Kingdom. You have to dig down into the mountainside to get pieces of granite that are that big. And then also the quality of the granite that comes from having, those large chunks of material. That's typically, the core of the granite quarries and mountains. Like, so this granite has come from a quarry. You can't, that's a huge contradiction in the story to say, well, the Old Kingdom guys weren't really quarrying. They were just using stuff that was laying around. It doesn't match the evidence that's right there.
I think we should mention maybe that when John Anthony West had a group out there, I think about 5 years ago, he talked about they did core drilling about 50 feet in front of the Sphinx temple.
Yeah.
And they hit granite 50 feet down.
I think it was more like 100 feet.
100? Yeah.
You've got the video.
I'm old. My memory is a little slow, so.
Yeah.
But I can review that. But I know it just shocked me because how do you explain that?
It's a good point.
That's a lot of.
Yeah, let's just flip back real quick to see what you're talking about, because I've got that footage here. In fact, you might even be able to see the pipe in the ground from where they drilled it. But so this is
it's still there. Cool.
This image, yeah, there is, and I think I don't have it in this set of film, but I do. I think I went and looked at it on this recent trip. It's the same thing you see around the Sphinx. You can see the pipes, and you see the same thing in the Great Pyramid. Actually, there's in the entrance to the Queen's Chamber. There's where they've drilled. They typically have these metal pipes, but yeah. So the Valley Temple's at a lower elevation than the pyramids and the Giza Plateau itself, and so there's an elevation change to get stuff up to the Giza Plateau. But yeah, as Chuck was saying, they drilled 100 feet or so down in front of this and hit granite.
Oh my God!
And it's a lot. There's no granite.
I think there was a very ancient granite harbor down there, and they had it kind of shaped out like a basin with granite. And if we could see what that actually looked like, because the Nile at that time I think was so wide it went to both shores, scale and variance like Randall talks about back at that time.
Yeah.
That and I think if we got a look at what that really looked like, we would be twice as amazed we are at Giza at some of that stuff, and especially right in front of the Sphinx on that ancient harbor, for sure.
Yeah, I think so as well. It's remarkable, and I think it's also an indication that there may this causeway this is the video right now is showing the causeway that's down from that structure, the pyramid temple. It's in front of the second pyramid, so this is what connects the pyramid to the Sphinx and the Valley Temple. It's this huge constructed causeway, and it was probably roofed, and it's for sure got tunnels underneath it. This is where the Osiris shaft is. And there's huge shafts on this causeway that go down, and then you go down into the front of at least 100 feet down, and in front of the Valley Temple, which you can kind of see at the end of this footage, you've also got Granite that's 100 feet down. And how do you not think that all this stuff was connected? There's clearly, I think, a lot going on under the ground here, and I just wish someone could scan it properly and we could put the issue to bed. I think the same thing could be, we could do this at the Sphinx and actually figure this out. But you just can't find it. The research doesn't ever seem to happen for some reason.
So this is considered to be the floor of something, or the roof?
I think it's both, but this was the floor. This had a roof over it, but this was a constructed causeway. This is the ground level, I guess, or it's a little bit above the ground level. It's a huge built limestone causeway that connects the pyramid the pyramid structure to the Valley Temple.
Yeah, and it definitely looks aged, much like the the Sphinx temple blocks or the Sphinx enclosure. I mean, this is
it's very, very eroded,
very degraded.
Yeah. Yep.
And
so
then that structure you were showing previously, that's I don't know what you call it, the one that's right next to the pyramid that has the old limestone blocks.
Mm-hmm. Kent-Kawis.
Yeah, they have that huge wavy.
That looks like the top of it right there.
Yeah, that's it there. I think, Chuck. That's the pyramid of Kent-Kawis, or it says a structure or mastaba or whatever they call it. It has. I think
she was a fourth or fifth dynasty queen. And I think they just put a little tomb on top of a very sacred structure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that and the Sphinx are two of the original structures built at the same time as the three pyramids.
Yeah.
But there's a very interesting study that I was reading, or a PDF that I did a pyramid video on the middle pyramid. And it talks about how much of the original mound is under Khafre's pyramid and under Kent-Kawis, and under the Great Pyramid. And they think 11% of the mound is under Khafre's and 23% of the original mound is under the Great Pyramid. And it was an excellent study.
Yeah.
So
interesting.
And 64% of that structure is original bedrock Kent-Kawis.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And there's a causeway going right down to the Nile.
Yeah. Yeah, Keith Hamilton has done an excellent layman's guide to it as well, looking at the internal structure. Keith Hamilton does amazing work. Mm-hmm. He creates all of these 3D models of a lot of these structures, and he works from images. And yeah, he actually just left me a couple of comments on my website. I should use his work more in my videos. But if you ever want to understand this Kent-Kawis structure, there's a great layman's guide for it from Keith Hamilton. And just to catch up on the video here.
I know, Matt.
Go ahead. Yep. This is the Osiris shaft. I just want to let you guys know.
I know Matt did a video on it, and Go ahead, Ben.
No, go. Yeah, sorry. I know we're probably dealing with a bit of lag. I was just saying that's the Osiris shaft. We just come up to it and took a look at the entrance to the Osiris shaft. This is it here below the causeway, and this is the 3 levels that drops down 100 feet or so, and then it has the boxes in the rooms and the water at the bottom. But yeah, Kent-Kawis, I think, is this structure over here behind. It's to the west? North? Yeah, so that's the entrance to...
I know if you stand on top of the Valley Temple on December 21st, the sun sets right over that. And the way they use the sun to align their structures, that tells me that Kent-Kawis is used for mummification, maybe in pre-dynastic times.
Yeah.
And then they'd take the mummified king right down that causeway, do a little symbolic journey on the Nile.
Yeah, it makes sense.
That is my guess at what that is.
Yeah. So this is, again, just made huge limestone blocks, all constructed, and there's shafts all over the place down here that seem to dip down at least 100 feet. And then if you pay the money, they'll allow you now to go into the Osiris shaft, which is quite an adventure.
Yeah, that's that.
Causeways are underrated features in Egypt, I think.
Yeah, that is an amazing.
Some of them are amazing.
And yeah, it does make me think that it's like you were saying, Ben. It it probably had a roof over it, but it might also be a roof.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. I mean, it may even be like, I just think there's not potentially a roof for a structure. There could be blocks there, but then I definitely think there's tunnels, even if they're in the bedrock beneath it, and structures. Because that's, we should look at the footage of the Osiris shaft. Actually, it's quite a trip. It's just, you go straight down ladders into these chambers into the bedrock.
Yeah. The other question I had, we were looking earlier at the Valley Temple. And I just wanted to ask you about your impressions on. I mean, because it's you got the granite that seems to be sort of inside of it, right? Mm-hmm. And kind of encasing it. And that granite reminds me. I've never been there, but that granite reminds me of like the Osirian.
Oh, for sure.
It looks like that work, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which implies that granite and the Osirian is not as old as the original construction of that temple, because those blocks are heavily eroded and the granite's put right on top of the erosion, right? It's basically fit to it.
That's right. Yeah, and
so
we could take definitely multi-stage. And so Robert Schoch talks about this with the Valley Temple. So and you can see, I have footage of that. We went and found this, and I wanted to find the spot specifically that he points to. And there's a couple other videos online you can find where he's showing this. But yeah, so you have this very eroded limestone, and these are huge blocks of limestone, 150 tons, and they've been cased in granite. And the granite has been shaped to fit the erosion of the limestone, it looks like. There's definitely, it's not like a flat mating surface. These limestone blocks must have been eroded, and then somebody cased it in granite. So yeah, it's like, how long was the limestone there to get that eroded in the first place?
Yeah, there was, what I was going to say earlier is about that wavy pattern in those huge limestone blocks at the I guess it's the temple right next to the pyramid.
We'll see them here, yeah.
Yeah, so the fact that they continue through multiple blocks and they're on the same level and everything is interesting.
Right.
Suggests that it happened after it was built, as opposed to they would have quarried it. You would imagine they quarried it and they would have been finely cut.
Yep.
Squared off. So it looks a lot like the Sphinx enclosure. It looks like the Sphinx temple, or whatever they call it.
The Valley Temple?
Valley Temple, yeah. So yeah, I agree. It looks like all of that stuff was done at the same time.
Right.
Because the rock all has a similar erosion pattern.
Yeah, exactly. There's some stuff here, and so what we're looking at here in the video is this is back up at the causeway. This is the pyramid temple, if you like. This is the pyramid structure that's in front of the temple. The causeway's to the left in the image here, the pyramid's to the right. And you have the same thing here where you have granite blocks, and a lot of this has been so beat up and quarried. We don't really know exactly what it looks like, but some of the work here is it's the same as the Valley Temple. Like, you have massive blocks of limestone, and it looks like it's either been cased in or has had significant features made out of granite. Maybe we can listen to some audio here, see what it sounds like.
Is it the mortuary temple? Is that what they call it?
I guess, Chuck. Is that what they call the thing next to the pyramid?
The pyramid temple. That is how I know it.
Yeah, me too.
I guess I really haven't looked at that, but we got to remember this erosion here. It seems very ancient. We can all agree on that, right?
Yep.
Well, a lot of this has been buried for centuries and centuries and centuries. The Sphinx has been buried, and the enclosure has been buried for 2/3 of the time we know it to exist.
Yeah.
So when you look at your erosion, you got to take that into consideration too, on how old it is.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. How did it get eroded when it's buried? And I look at it. It's this. You see this in a lot of places at Giza. And just take a look at how big the single block is too, by the way. So just, and imagine what it might have been like when it wasn't eroded. You're talking about a pretty large block. Let's see if we can catch any audio here.
What is the height
You guys hear that?
And a half.
Yep.
Yeah, good. Yeah,
8 feet
I think
maybe.
it's probably a good guess.
Which is how many meters?
It's 2.5.
Yeah. And the width? The width is the same.
At the top, like that, the line.
Oh yeah, it's sharp.
Yeah.
Holy
That's
crap.
rather black. And the width is the same. What about the ring? It
Well, you
starts
got
here. Look over.
10.
We still haven't seen a seam in the block yet, so now we're at like where the edge of the block is around here.
It's a good lens. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, that's huge. Wow.
3.
12.
13.
13.
Is there one under it too, Ben?
Let's say 12.
Yeah, so I think this is on top of a causeway, and yeah, there is blocks underneath this as well. Yeah, there's definitely another layer below it, and in fact, we'll get to look a bit more at the. This has all been built up because there was a slope, and this will become more apparent when we get to the pyramid itself. But this is one of the most remarkable things about the second pyramid. It's built into a hill. It's literally on a slope, but they've engineered the bedrock to make it flat. And this all slopes down to the causeway, and this is all flat here, but you can kind of see the blocks in the floor below it.
12.
So he just paced it
And
off. It
let's
was like
say
40 feet or
not
something.
2.5
Yeah,
by 2.5,
13
let's say 2
meters.
meter by 2 meters.
You said 15 steps or something?
13 steps, so about 13. You sort of go a meter a step, more roughly, right? And then there's however much limestone weighs per cubic meter, and
It's 48.
48 cubic meters at least.
so 48 cubic meters at least. I think this is probably on the conservative side.
If we divide it by 2.3 tons, so
Wow.
48 cubic meters by 2.3 will give you how much?
So 120 tons, more or less, right? So that's 120, 130 ton block of limestone, one of many.
We said like 2. We said 2.5.
But yeah,
And it's
So-
like it's almost decomposed. It's so heavily eroded, pockmarked. You can see up at the top edge there. It looks like there's a deeper erosion line, like that was maybe where it was buried up to for a while, and wind and sand was eroding that
Right.
upper layer. And below that is I mean, just it's looks like the moon. It's very
it's cratered and pockmarked.
cratered and pockmarked and just heavily decomposed. Yeah, it's very, very, very old. And like Chuck says, if you remember that it's been buried for most of the time, like occasionally something would uncover it, and then it would erode a little bit, and then it would get buried again. So, how old must it be to look like that?
There are some great pictures from the early explorers that were there 150 years ago, and you can just tell that it's sticking out of the ground, period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the pyramids, maybe, I don't know, 30 feet up buried.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you guys ready to take a break? Before we come back.
Yeah.
and look
Let me show you one more feature real quick. Can we do that? Can we
Yeah.
extend for a couple minutes, and I'll show you one more thing, and then we'll get on to the actual. And after the break, stick around because we're going to get into the inside. We're going to go straight to the inside of the pyramid. But so there's granite, and again, this is a point I want to make about all of these pyramid structures, and I think this is a key for a lot of the Old Kingdom stuff. You have the same mix of stones. You have granite, basalt, limestone, and alabaster. And in fact, there's alabaster or the white calcite. I just want to show you this. This is sort of, again, you have these limestone blocks, but as we move up here, I'll skip for that. There's a good shot of the erosion of these blocks. But as we move up here,
Yeah,
what you find...
Scoop out there.
Yeah, the scoop. But the same thing that I talk about at Abu Sir and at a bunch of other places, you also have here in the ground, which is these channeled blocks. So there's a channel in the ground, and they run into these, and they're made often of alabaster or the white calcite, which is kind of a real expensive stone to try and make this stuff out of. There's a channel block right here, and I think if I remember correctly. I think looking down right here, there's we're standing on it. So this is the alabaster, and you can see there's the channel in it. There was these underground or under level. I've got a ton of this of footage of these in a lot of places, but this is white calcite, and this is like a water form stone. You have to dig into springs to get this, and again, to get these big chunks that are like this, you have to dig right down to the deep into these springs to find this type of stone. And for some reason, they seem to deploy these as well. And a lot of this has been quarried because it's a great stone to work in, and it's very pretty. But there's still a lot of this stuff in the ground here, and you find this typically in the Old Kingdom pyramid structures. You find that same combination of stones.
Yeah, you find that in caves and stuff too.
Yep. And you have the channeled blocks here. So, yeah, let's take a break, I guess, and then we'll come back and we'll get to the inside of the pyramid.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back from the break, and I guess we're going to go in. Ben's going to show us some of the interior of the pyramid, but before we do that, I wanted to talk about these erosion patterns. And I don't know the specific geological processes that cause this, but we have a very similar looking limestone rock here in the Texas Hill Country where we live, and I see these types of erosion patterns often always associated with a ravine, seasonal creeks, things like that, where when the ravine starts and it's going down and it's cutting into the solid limestone, you will often see some of the harder areas of rock that are sticking out, much like the top of this, and then there will be these big curved patterns. To me, I've always thought they were cut by water. Right. And the question is it a current that's cutting it, or is it down cutting? Because it seems like if it's down cutting, it would create vertical grooves.
Right.
So I've always associated it with lateral flowing water, and you'll often see it at the down at the rivers, wherever the water level is, maybe a couple of feet above, you'll see these nice curved things going along laterally along the rock above the water line of the river, and there'll be multiple stages of them depending on how high the hill is. So that's when I saw this going across this joint here, to me that says those blocks existed, then that was cut by a current.
Right. Yeah.
And then the one above it, there's another one above it, and that was a different flow, a different current. So maybe it was flooding, a couple of different episodes of flooding.
And it could it also be like maybe not necessarily a current, but just standing water, and it's got waves,
wave action,
like wind blown waves just cutting into that.
Yeah,
and the water level drops, and it's cutting the next level. I don't know.
Yeah, we could go because we have a lake nearby, and I've seen it at the lake. So it could be wave action. Some of the features we see around here are, huge curves. You can stand inside of them. They're and they're just beautiful curves, and they just run all along a cliff face.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to imagine here, like you're standing way up at the top of a hill that hundreds of feet above the
you can see
the floodplain, and you're just like, wow, when did this happen?
What happened here?
Anyway, I want to point that out. Maybe there are other processes that could do the same thing. I don't know.
Yeah, good question for a geologist, and it's definitely different to the vertical erosion, the rainfall erosion you see in the Sphinx enclosure that Robert Schoch talks about. But
right,
and this again, not isolated just to this part of Giza. You see this it's on several of the areas around the pyramids. I'm pretty sure you also see this in some of the pyramid temple structures at like the Bent Pyramid, I think as well. There's a similar degree of erosion in some of those areas. But yeah, it's interesting. I don't know what causes it.
Yeah, it would be interesting to check the elevation, of these cuts. So you might see when you find cuts at other sites, is it the same elevation? Is it higher or lower? That'd be interesting.
Yeah, it would. Yeah, I don't know. It's I probably need to sort out a bit more of the geologist questions. This is something for maybe Randall be good, or a geologist, somebody that can identify this in that type of stone. I know when Brian Forrester travels, he often And I think also the Kemet School itself, I mean, Susan Moore, they have geologists that travel with them that have a a solid understanding of that, can probably explain it a little better, at least in terms of what happens in limestone.
The other feature that I noticed a lot is all the tiny little holes, right?
Yep.
In the exterior of the stone. We see that here a lot. They call it it's karst
Right.
bedrock, meaning like little openings everywhere. And so excavating down into these hillsides and stuff, sometimes you will break into rock that's just full of these tiny little tunnels. So that doesn't, I think that rock would obviously erode faster once it was removed from the ground. Like sometimes the holes are filled with a less consolidated type of stone, so they may erode out just with wet and dry. They degrade and fall out. But we see a lot of that same kind of stuff here, and especially on the surface, you'll see a lot of the it looks like wormholes all into the rock. But we do find it digging straight into the hillside. You'll find some rock like that.
Yeah, it just seems strange that somebody would say, yeah, we can use that for building stone. You know, right?
Yeah.
It's weak, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But maybe they did. Maybe it was aesthetic. You know.
Yeah, at the time, who knows what it looked like when they first carried it out, whether it had those holes in it or not, if that's something that's happened afterwards. You get the feeling that it was probably pretty smooth when they originally started. And we know that certainly if it's come from the plateau, which a lot of this stone has, the built like these big blocks, for example, I think are supposed to have come from the plateau, as well as a lot of the blocks in the pyramids. Not all of them have had that degree of erosion to them, so it sort of lends a bit more credence to the idea that there was some sort of ground level water that seems to have affected those blocks. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I haven't climbed the pyramid or anything. I haven't seen a lot of good footage up in the upper cases to see, or courses to see if there's similar erosion on the limestone up there.
But it also reminds me of like Coral Castle, right?
That's limestone.
It's very porous. It's got holes all in it, and I mean he built some pretty big structure, not pyramids, right?
Yeah,
but
he did.
he stacked up.
Edward Lee, he was quite a guy.
Lee Scarlin, he dedicated his life to it. There is some footage. So I look recently. There's been some footage of him using block and tackles, like that was uncovered to do a lot of that stuff, which was like, huh. But yeah, I think some of the mystery may have been dispelled. At least I looked into it a while back. It's a good topic to revisit at some point. But there was some new video that came up of him actually moving blocks around with block and tackles, just yanking on chain. I think either way you cut it, like the guy was dedicated. He just spent his life doing that stuff. I mean, it's quite a tremendous effort to build something like that, no matter how you do it.
Yep.
Yeah, it's interesting spot. I'd like to see it sometime. I've not seen it. So
yeah, we need to go.
Yeah. So I just wanted to set this a little bit in terms of going into the pyramid. Pretty sure north entrance on this. This is the face. There's two entrances to the pyramid. So we'll talk a bit more about the internal structure, and you can always look up a map, a schematic of the insides. This is up at roughly around where the upper entrance is. You can't get in here, but you can get up if the guards let you. You can get up on to where the actual entrance is. There's an upper and a lower entrance, and the lower entrance enters in the bedrock. It's basically in beneath this little hut here, I think, that you see in the ground. But just for a bit of perspective, this is up on the pyramid itself, looking to where it's been cut out of the hill. I talked earlier that this is cut into a slope, and we'll take a closer look at this whole area out here a bit later on, where it's been clearly quarried out of the side of the hill. And we'll get around the back and look at that. But I just wanted to say, just to show where that second entrance is. It's up here, and we're kind of coming down the steps. And then the lower entrance is down below here. And that's the one that you get into it today if you go visit. So we're walking down on the northern side of the pyramid. And you can see the slope of the bedrock plateau itself. And this is where they decided to build this thing for some reason. And, I've heard that it said that if they just moved the whole structure something like 15 or 20 meters further towards the Sphinx, they wouldn't have had to deal with the issues of building it into a slope and had to do the remarkable kind of engineering that they did do to the bedrock and the plateau itself to make it to make it level and be the structure that it is.
Yeah, so it makes you wonder about, what was the importance of the specific spot?
Right.
Was there something underground already?
Right. Well, and so what's interesting, this is the entrance, the lower entrance that's straight into the bedrock, and everything below is bedrock. There's literally, this structure could have been here before this pyramid ever was put on top of it, and then
it looks tiled. Is it tiled there?
Yeah, it is. So there's tiling on the bedrock itself, but it just, other than these tile blocks, this sinks straight down into the bedrock, which you'll see, I think, in this next shot here as we start to go down into the tunnel. Right. So this is going down from that lower entrance. This is where you walk in, and you'll notice, like, as opposed to the Great Pyramid, a lot of the other pyramids, this is all bedrock. There's no blocks in here. The upper passageway, which connects to this one, is cased in granite inside the pyramid. So that upper entrance that is above this one, it is cased in granite. But everything you'll see in this is bedrock, except for a couple of little exceptions, which we'll get to. And I think there's audio on this that we can hear. Maybe I'll turn it down a bit. Probably just my chattering, being excited. Sort of. This was, and just to set the context, this is the footage from recently in December. This was like the first or second day I was there. It was just me, Yusuf and I, and Henry and Jimmy. And so we were just out a day ahead of the tour, and we just sort of romping around Giza, and
that looks very smooth too on the interior. As opposed, I thought.
Yeah, go ahead. You're right.
Well, it seems a lot finer work than I guess in the Great Pyramid, or is it about the same?
I think the Great Pyramid, the passageway into the, Mahmud's hole obviously has been hammered into the Great Pyramid, but the casing stones and the work inside it is quite fine, I think. Some of it's been damaged over time. But this is incredibly good work too. This is a straight as an arrow kind of passageways.
Hey, exactly is that? Are you crouching pretty seriously there?
Yeah. So you'll hunch down. This is. I think I was just telling Jimmy, get used to this position because we'll be doing it quite a bit. Yeah. So it's like I think it's about 4 foot, maybe a little under 4 feet high. This channel, this passageway. You can go down forward, and I can go down forward in all the pyramid tunnels except for the bent pyramid. That's actually a tighter entrance tunnel. It's a little smaller, and it's more comfortable to go down backwards. But there is a granite block here at the bottom as well that may have been blocking this or something. I don't know, but it's sort of shoved aside into an alcove. Yeah, so this is the initial descent down into the bedrock, and yeah, you'll crunch down, and you'll see it on the way out what the posture is. And then you can stand up in here, which is not always the case in some of these structures, that you can't always stand up in a lot of the spaces, but certainly this area you can.
And so got that in there. There's a shaft to the right that went further down.
There is, yes, there is.
So this is already laid out different than I had imagined it.
They call it the so-called Queen's Chamber, which is silly because that's not where she was buried. Like, I have something else attributed to her.
Wow.
And I think Yusuf actually explains it here.
You okay? Yeah, it ducks down here and then it goes up again.
Yeah. The torch again real quick, I'm sorry. Wow. Have you been down in there before?
No, they open it up for...
It's all frame A ceiling, rock cut chamber in the bedrock, and it's what's labeled as the Queen's chamber as well, but even academics knows that this is not true because the Queen, her name is Merisang, and Merisang's burial is here in the Eastern Cemetery. She was the wife of King Khafre.
So yeah, Merisang, I think is what he's saying, is the wife of King Khafre, and she's buried in the Eastern Cemetery. But they call this the Queen's Chamber, and it's kind of one of those contradictions. And I don't know if you caught it, but Yusuf says it goes down, it opens up into a rock-cut and A-framed ceiling. And I think it's about the same dimensions as, more or less, either the King's Chamber or the Queen's Chamber in the Great Pyramid, is what I've heard of this chamber. But yeah, I've not been down here. It's locked. It's a special, you've got to rent the thing on a special permission, and then they will open it up for you. But yeah, there is a passageway off to the right that goes down. And
Ben, is there any hint of soot or anything on the ceiling anywhere in there?
Not that I've noticed. There's maybe a little bit in the Queen's Chamber itself, but no, there's In fact, we do want the audio on this because there is some interesting.
Only private visits. They open it up for privates, but
See if you can see it, but I didn't recall any soot.
next trip.
Next one, we do the middle pyramid and the base of the Sphinx.
Yes.
You cannot do all the privates on one tour.
No. Yeah, next to it. Next to it.
10,000.
Yeah, no. Let's not do that.
Easier going up because you lean forward.
Oh, you're right. Thanks.
Yeah. Are the walls plastered, or is that just was it originally smooth and it's just been slightly eroded?
I think that's the case. I didn't see any real signs of plaster on these walls.
Okay.
Obviously, it's been eroded, been worked on. We've added the railings and the electric system and the stairs, which makes it nice. It'd be a bit more difficult without the wooden stairs.
Two big dudes. All right, Jimmy. You can lead out, Jimmy. You go first on the way out, Jimmy.
Okay.
You don't have to film my ass the whole way.
Yeah, I just stopped.
We will put a sign on the entrances. YouTubers go first.
Right.
It's always an issue. So sometimes I've noticed like the guides typically lead you in there. So you get in the habit of like, hey, let me go. I've got the camera. Let me go first because I want the shot without your ass in it. So it's interesting.
Ben, let me ask you one question. In the Great Pyramid, I know it's something like 12 stories down to the subterranean chamber. How far is it down to where you're going down there? Do you know?
Not as deep, no. So you saw the deepest part was where we first came down, and in that little horizontal passageway. I got to imagine it's probably a third of the depth of the Great Pyramid passageway.
Okay.
I think that's like 80. It's almost 90 something meters. The Great Pyramid descending passageway. It's a long passageway. It's a hall, and this is only like probably a third at best of the same sort of depth.
This is Bedrock.
Yeah, and you're again all in the bedrock here.
Going down. Oh wow, look at that.
That is amazing.
Yeah,
That hallway.
It's very resonant too, as you'll hear.
That looks like golden ratio proportions right there.
Yeah.
Doesn't it? So I'll mention this because we spin around and look at it here in the footage. I'll just mute it real quick. And we get a better look at this on the way out, but it opens up because this passageway up there is where it goes up to that upper entrance. So when you turn around and look behind you, there's like a big gap in the ceiling and a passageway that goes up. And again, we'll take a closer look on the way out. You'll also see the big air conditioning box that's in there. And thankfully, Yusuf, this was nice. Yusuf knows the guys, and normally, and he actually turns it on when we're coming out. You can't pick up any of the resonance of these chambers because these things will be roaring and just be huge noise in there. And you also have that in the third pyramid. But Yusuf, knows the guy and he had him turn it off for us. So we'll hear what it sounds like in this chamber. Let me put the audio back on.
Yeah, that's still Bedrock. You see how far the Bedrock goes? Yeah. That iron, look at the iron formation. Yeah. It's so strong up there. So condensed. Now, the question I always ask.
Get to going forward again. Here we go.
This is insane, dude. I'm in Bedrock right now. Like this is. What's going on with this thing?
The guy here.
Am I running out of? I may have ran out of space. I don't know.
What are you saying?
I got. I'm switching to my iPhone to this thing. I think I ran out of.
Oh man, that's cool. Yeah.
I'm not quite hitting it there.
All right, those look like blocks. Is that blocking on the side there?
Yeah, I noticed that too.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I don't know. It's bedrock. Whether it had its markings or something, or it does. But it's like maybe it was plaster. I'm not sure, but this is. Yeah, it's not. Even whether.
Yeah, back up maybe 5 seconds. There was a whole set of them on the left. On the left side. Yeah, see that?
Yeah. I mean, it possibly is repaired. Like this may well have been, because this was all full of debris and was damaged. Right. My guess might be that this is a modern repair, since it's been
Right.
And and Chuck, they could have cleaned it too. I know they've done that in the past, where if there's soot in here, they clean it. But yeah, this I suspect this is probably repair. You can see the concrete. Yeah, you're right. And so maybe a good time to mention, it was 1818, I think, when this was first really cleared out and discovered, and there'd been a few efforts to try and to penetrate it. So there was clearly like blockage, and this had some damage in here. And you'll know who discovered it once we get into the chamber. There's no missing it.
Mr. C. I can't remember who.
Yeah, you'll get it when we see the wall.
All right,
Italian.
So it's about 6 feet almost.
You have the chamber inside is resonating.
I don't know why the audio messes up a bit, but it does. I need to see me in here. It's my part. I cut myself out of these damn footages, but you can get a sense of the height of the tunnel. The audio also screws up a bit here. I don't know why the microphone on the thing wasn't. It sort of drops in and out a little bit here.
I'd like to get a snapshot of that for measuring.
Belzoni.
Belzoni.
Wow.
Yeah, so in the chamber. So yeah, Belzoni discovered this. This is the A-frame ceiling of the chamber that's in here. The granite box is down the end, and you also have the only thing that's not there's not bedrock in here is the ceiling, and the ceiling has an A-frame ceiling. You'll see it up high. It has, and this is the fine the Tura limestone. Again, this is the limestone that has been brought in from a quarry that's a distance from Giza. I'm not sure how far, but you'll see that in the ceiling here.
The entire chamber is covered in the bedrock, except for the ceiling.
Yeah.
The ceiling only is covered the Torah found limestone. That looks like cement with the ceiling.
No, it's limestone.
That's a good comment. Like Henry says, it looks like cement. Like that's how it looks like a modern cement job. But nope, that's however many thousands of years old, fine Tura white limestone.
Like the casing stone. Very finely joined, yeah.
It's a cool space. This was only the second time I had the chance to be in here on this trip.
Ben, I know you've been to the pyramid, I think of Unis or Venus.
Wenis, yeah.
Is that chamber in there kind of similar to those smaller pyramid chambers as far as what they look like with that ceiling and stuff?
There's an A-frame ceiling in there, I think. Yes, I think it is an A-frame. I think, and we can look at Wenis. I've been in there a couple times. I'm just trying to think from memory if it has the A-frame ceiling.
But that kind of reminds me of those what you find under the pyramid of Teti and Unis and Pepi and those people, the smaller pyramids.
Yeah, with that ceiling, yeah.
So it looks like they tiled around put stones around the box there.
Yeah, it's kind of built into the floor. It actually sits a little lower than floor level, and then they did build up around it in granite. So you have the box here with its lid, which is pretty fine work. There's actually a real nice drill hole. The tube drill holes. You can see the striations on these. You can also I didn't realize this until the last day on the tour. We came in here again. There's also tube drill holes on the underside of the lid, so maybe it was doweled into place, or there might have been something to, like a pin. I think it looked to the eye like it lined up.
Is there a lip on the underside of the lid? It looked like
it looked like there was a lip,
unless that was the support that's holding it up.
And it looks like there's a lip on the inner edge of the box there too.
Yeah, it might be looks like a little lip. Let's see if I can just go back here. Just here.
Yeah, there's a lip there, and when you were walking up and looking straight at the lid, you could see what looked like a
Back up a
you
bit.
could see sort of under it. Look, yeah, see that?
Or is that the support that's holding
that
it?
the-
I think no. I think you're right. I think that is a lip.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it sits
Yeah,
down.
it plops down in there. Yeah, there you go.
Wow.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, clop like funk, and then I guess the edge of it probably sits right on the edge of the thing, and you can see where there's. I guess they've been prying at it. This is probably all pry bar damage to try and get it open.
Yep.
And then all these granite blocks around the outside. Yeah, it's a nice box. It's it's a nice piece of work.
And so you're looking at those are drill holes there? Is
That
what you're talking about?
that one's eroded, but there's a drill hole here on the box. There's one on either end, and then on the underside of the lip as well, of the lid.
Just on the backside there, or not? There's not 4 of them. There's only 2.
I think they're on the backside. Yeah, I think
These tube drills.
tube drills.
Yeah, really nice tube drills on the corners here. Yep.
He's some little kid running down the hallway.
Yeah, I can hear the kid.
Come in
So
for
this
the
is-
photo.
This is the king, considered the king's chamber, right?
I guess, yeah, the burial chamber they'll call that, and that's the sarcophagus. That's the story.
Yeah. Someplace special.
I've looked at a lot of Fourth Dynasty sarcophaguses, and that is not a sarcophagus.
Right.
They decorated them. They put their life stories on them, their afterlife journey.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were going to build one of the most impressive monuments in the world, you were going to certainly immortalize yourself like the pharaohs did. You would have put your name all over that place. It makes no sense that, somebody in the Fourth Dynasty would go out of their normal ways of doing things and not tell the world forever that this is their place. I think those sarcophagus are purely symbolic.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's the other thing. That, again, no hieroglyphs. There's no inscriptions. And in fact, I was just trying to find out how they attribute this to Khafre in general. I know that the whole the statue of Khafre, the really famous one, Khafre enthroned, the diorite statue of it was found in the Valley Temple, and I guess by extension, and of course it has his name on it, which is written in poorly done hieroglyphs relative to the rest of the statue. But
yeah.
I believe on the
first.
The dream stela between the paws of the Sphinx had one chipped off area hieroglyphs where Khaf, the first part of Khafre's name.
Right. That's right.
They think, and that's how they attributed mostly that's how they attributed the place to him. But Khaf is such a common syllable in the ancient Egyptian text. There could have been numerous pharaohs or rulers or kings that had that in their name. That is very common.
Wasn't that not even in a cartouche, or was that encased within a cartouche? The Khaf. Do you remember?
I don't remember exactly. I just know that is in the part of a chipped off section of the text in the dream stela.
That's right.
That's all I remember specifically.
Yeah, so it's hard, and they're the, as I think I said in one of my videos, and thus the house of cards that is history is built. Like that's how they build the house of cards of history, with these little attributions and whatnot. I mean, I would say that the whole Khafre enthroned statue, it was probably, I'm sure it was dedicated to him. It has his name was written on it at some point, but it just doesn't match the engineering of the statue itself.
Right,
which happens in a lot of them, I think. So this is again looking up at that upper entrance. Maybe once I work out my camera issues, there's the bedrock above us, but then so there's that passageway that goes up to the upper entrance and then up into the pyramid structure, and is cased in granite.
There is not one syllable of hieroglyphs in there anywhere, is there, or even graffiti?
No, not as far as I know. I've looked. I've not found any records of anything in this pyramid of any writing. So they turn the air conditioner back on, and that's the sound that you hear
All
when
the
you
way
go
up
in
there, huh?
Yeah, and this is Bedrock with the dark lots of iron.
Oh, I see. Yeah, the iron in it, in the limestone.
Yeah.
Use of saying there's lumps of iron in the limestone, like there's iron formations in it.
Huh.
But yeah, you get this roaring noise normally. Down you go, and then back out again. They're not as complex a structure as Giza, as the Great Pyramid, which, you know, it's do you do that first or second? You know, it's kind of like, do you build on the designs that you did before, or do you just do you go backwards? It's sort of an interesting. Oh, there you go. That's not a bad little tone there for you. I think I see it here in the waveform.
With that machine, it will be really hard to feel the resonance.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, you been waiting on me?
No, whenever.
I mean, is it possible that there are other still unknown passageways or interior chambers? Because most of this, you guys aren't even in the pyramid. It's all underground, right?
Right. Yeah, it's it's everything's the most of the structure. There's really, I don't know if they've done any other testing, to what degree of testing they've done. This is the up passageway. I don't know what degree of testing that they've done to check that, but it certainly seems possible. I mean, again, you're talking about a pyramid that's almost as big as the Great Pyramid, and it's possible. They haven't found any other entrances. The only entrance that they did find is that connects down to this structure.
Right. I'm just interesting because you build that entire massive structure, but all of the passages are in a place where the structure is completely unnecessary. Like, you don't need that giant pyramid to have these passageways. So it just seems like, I don't know, that is that giant triangle totally symbolic?
Unless you're symbolizing.
Yes, that's what I was saying. Is it entirely symbolic, or does it have interior stuff?
Who knows? Somebody.
Great question.
Scan it. Let's see. Can we get a muon detector down there? Maybe do that after we get done in the Great Pyramid, because they're still doing that at the Great Pyramid. But I'd love to. I'm sure they could plop it down in the bottom here, and although that'd probably mean they have to close it off to the public again.
Well, they just
Ben. One of the things that you.
Yep.
One of the things Ben brought up is the chronology when these were built. I think what you have to look at is the small pyramid. Yeah. I think all these three structures were built basic purpose. I don't know, but would a pharaoh who wanted to be immortalized and known as the greatest ruler of all time, would he have built a tiny pyramid or a small pyramid next to his predecessor, saying, "I'm only this great"?
Right.
I don't think that's one thing that just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, because Menkaure is noticeably small, and then again, you could be right. Like, that could have been the first. And then it gets bigger from there. It just seems to work better that way in just the nature of progression too, right? It's just, given that the chronology comes from the story, and we know the dynasties, and we know, and then you have this loose attachment that's very tenuous at best, trying to associate these various rulers with these pyramids, and that's kind of how we derive the chronology of the whole site. It's definitely questionable, I think.
Yep.
Go ahead.
There are good questions, and I have more. And I think Kyle's got stuff to say too, but let's take a break, and then we'll come back.
Alrighty.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen. Our third segment. And we're back out of the pyramid now. So what are we going to be looking at next, Ben?
We are going to go around the outside. There's a couple of things I wanted to that are worthy of noticing, particularly, and this relates to how the pyramid is built into a slope of a hill and just the amount of engineering that went into it. But before we go there, we were just talking in the break about, and we mentioned earlier about the attribution of the pyramid, that there's very little, there's no hieroglyphs specifically in there, and that the whole story is put together through, we found this artifact over here near it. And so I wanted to I do have some footage of the very famous diorite statue called Khafre Enthroned, It's a remarkable piece of work. You know, Petrie has quotes about it. He talks about it. He talked to artists in his time, and they were absolutely astounded about this, the quality of this. It's made from diorite, which is one of those, you know, stones that's harder than granite. And it's in a museum, and it's right next to this one. We'll pan around and take a look at it first, but I've made this point in a few videos, and it's worth reinforcing here. And I think we've talked about it maybe a little earlier as well. It's one of my little pet points to try and make out, which is that the writing on these statues and on some of these objects, we talked about it with the Serapeum, is of an obvious lesser quality to that of the object itself. And you see that even on these beautiful statues. And of course, the writing is how things are dated and related to the story of history, right? So based on the writing, that's how we say it's this old and it was built for this king in this time period. And as we'll spin around and look at Khafre Enthroned, because it shows the same things, but this, you can't get that close to it. It's because it's roped off, but this one you can get right up close to, and you can clearly see here the details of the statue itself. Look at the fingernails and everything, and here I'll just pause it real quick, because there's a lotus flower motif in here, and there's a couple things that I typically point out are like, this lotus flower motif, it's polished, it's shaped well, there's fine lines in terms of how they've shaped the stone. All of the surfaces, including the curved surfaces, are polished. Clearly contemporary with the rest of the object itself, but when it comes to the writing, you can see the writing's pretty obviously been chiseled on there. It's chiseled marks, you see the marks. It's very, very good work, but it's not perfect. The lines aren't quite straight versus the object itself has perfectly straight lines. And then the key thing for me is the interior surfaces of these glyphs aren't polished. So the interior of this bird glyph here isn't polished, when they clearly did have the ability to polish any surface of the stone. So this is the sort of thing you start to notice on lots and lots of ancient of these statues, slabs, boxes that have writing. And, you know, and compare that writing to the detail that's of the chest. You see the bones in the chest. I mean, incredible work. Like, whoever did this was a master of the medium and of working in the stone. You've got the belly button detail. That's all polished in there. The inside of the fingernails are all nice and polished. It just strikes me that the writing was added with a vastly different degree of technological sophistication and working in the material than the statue itself.
Wow, and the breaking, the way it's with the way the stone fractures reminds me a lot of flint.
Yep.
Which is really hard.
Yeah, flint's an 8, I think, as well on the Mohs scale. I think this stone's an 8, and then we spin around here and take a look at this is a conglomerate that's, I think, also like granodiorite, if not diorite, or green cyanite or something. Incredibly hard stone. And we'll spin around here and actually get to Khafre Enthroned, which is the statue that is used to also to attribute the Valley Temple, the Sphinx, the second pyramid to Khafre. In fact, so Yusuf right here is pointing out there's overcuts. There's actual like saw cuts that they've gone a little too deep in on the armpits. Maybe I didn't actually get the right video here to look at Khafre Enthroned.
It would be interesting too.
The next one,
like how similar are these statues? They're the same position. They have like the way Christopher Dunn compares the faces. You know, how was this cut out by a machine that had that built in? You know what I mean? Is it that close, or are they?
I don't know if that's study that's ever been done. I think it. I wish it was. Here we go. This is Khafre Enthroned.
They need to be scanned.
They do need to be scanned, indeed. I can't believe that I've lost this all of a sudden. I had this in the break. We spun around and looked at Khafre Enthroned. I swear we did.
That is amazing.
Yeah, let me... I do want to try and find it, I think.
Well, while he's looking for that, you want to tell the story again of you went to was it a museum in Italy?
Yeah, I went to the Vatican Museum in Italy, and they had all these statues that looked just like this. They were amazing, and I noticed the same thing. I mean, that was the statues were, the work of the statue was one level of sophistication, and then the hieroglyphs were another level, like a lesser level of sophistication. And then in some cases, at the very bottom of the statue, there was Roman really roughly scratched in like Roman letters and stuff on the bottoms of the sky. I'm like, okay, this is, later people doing the same thing.
Yep. It's human nature.
I think in the museum, well, I don't know what the Romans were doing, but it looked like they were categorizing it or numbering it, putting a serial number on it. It's kind of what it looks like, because then you have the modern like written numbers that they're.
Yeah. They do the same thing. We do the same thing now. This is Khafre enthroned. So it's this beautiful green diorite statue with the falcon behind the head, protecting it. And again, you've got writing next to the feet. You've got that lotus flower motif on the side. And it's a wonderful statue. I mean, you can see why it's so precious. But again, same thing with the writing. I don't have a good shot of it, but the writing next to the feet here is the same. It's chiseled out, and it's obviously I'm sure it has Khafre's name on it. There's a tube drill between the feet, which is another level of technology. So yeah, this to me screams inherited object that was then reclaimed, but beautiful. I mean, absolutely,
Yeah.
What it must have been incredible find.
Was that a drill mark between the feet, or was that a sun disk representation?
This is a common thing on statues. I believe that's a tube drill that's been polished out. Okay. But yeah, you have that's been hollowed out with a tube drill. That's the only way.
What's interesting about that is that there are a whole lot of statues where there's a little person between the feet.
Yeah,
of
in
the
some of them.
giant statue. So I wonder if that was maybe there was a metal, like a gold.
Yeah.
Set into that hole or something. I don't know.
Possibly and gold was used in a lot of these.
Sometimes those little people are meant to represent the soul of the king.
We always thought it was understanding.
Yeah, they're standing under understanding.
Understanding, yeah.
That was they are.
It depends.
Okay, so back to the pyramid. And there's two features I want to point out here. So again, we talked about how it's built into the side of a hill. This is on the. God, what am I got to get my. This is the eastern side, sloping down, and so what happened with the pyramid was they had to cut out the backside to like hollow out, and you'll see when we get around there's like a 10-meter cliff. We saw it briefly in an earlier shot. So they've dug down 10 meters, and then they formed part of the pyramid itself out of bedrock, which we'll see. But then on this side, the eastern side, I think it is, they had to build the plateau up. So it's not just bedrock. They had to do a tremendous amount of engineering in the plateau and in the foundations itself to then provide that flat platform to build the pyramid and the pyramid structures on. And so the key thing here is to look at what we're standing on, because these are three-dimensional interlocking limestone tiles. And the one thing I'll pause here real quick to show you is you get a sense of how deep they are with this line here where the camel is laying down. So you're still talking about a meter or so thick, so 3-4 feet thick, massive limestone blocks in the ground. And they all interlock like a giant 3D puzzle. And look at the size of some of these foundation tiles. The interesting thing about them also is that they truly are interlocking in 3 dimensions. They not only are shaped to fit each other side by side, but they fit the bedrock beneath it. So they're actually been shaped to match the bedrock, and there's areas where you can see that. But some of these limestone tiles, 150 tons, easy.
And see, that's suggestive again of the earthquake proof or whatever. It's like they're expecting this whole system to be vibrating, whether it's earthquakes or whatever. But
right.
You wouldn't want to flatten the bedrock and then set stones on that because they could slide around.
Right.
But to fit them to the contours of the existing bedrock, they would stay in position, even with vibration.
Exactly. Yeah, and there's, it's interesting too, because in this you see this also in the Great Pyramid to a lesser degree, but not only did they do that in the foundation, but they actually have blocks, and you also see this in the Great Pyramid, but there are some of those blocks formed from the bedrock itself. So it's like the ground kind of locks into the whole structure You know, you've got in this pyramid, it's actually like 3 or 4 courses on the I guess the western side that that lock in, and it's kind of they just sort of gradually transfer to blocks with the slope of the bedrock. So they dug down, and we'll see this on the other side. But you know, everyone walks over this, and the camels crap all over it. But it's like, you know, a huge piece of that. Look at the size of this thing.
Now, are these like stones that are in there? I keep seeing these little round stones between the joints. Is that what they are?
You see some incredible detail in the foundation tiles, not only on this, the other pyramid too. And it also extends even to the foundation that's what would have originally been beneath the casing blocks. Yes, we do not want to buy the cat today, sir. It's just like there was plenty of Egyptians here, just out of interest. They, you know, the Egyptians roll up here on Fridays and Saturdays, and we were, I think, here on a Saturday. But yeah, so the little blocks, the little keystone blocks, and some of them are tiny. And in some cases on the Great Pyramid, and even here, where the casing stones have been removed, you see them underneath, like as if they were never meant to be seen. But it's this incredible level of detail that's in the foundation that's just mind-boggling. Like, why do that? Why not just fill it with sand if it's just, you know, who cares? But apparently they cared. It had to be solid.
So you're saying
Ben, in front of the Sphinx, I know there's massive paving stones. Are those the same as you see up there by the second pyramid?
I think so. Yeah, there's a similar size. There's a lot like the Valley Temple and the Sphinx. Oh, you mean in front of the pores of the Sphinx, or just directly in front of it?
No, I'm talking in front of the Sphinx Temple and the Valley Temple. I know there's big paving stones on the ground there. I just wondered if they're very similar to what you see up there on the top of the plateau.
I'd have to look, I'm not sure. I have to dig up some footage and look, but I would suspect so, given that the Pyramid Temple and the Valley Temple have similar sized blocks of limestone, and this paving system almost extends down the whole causeway. It's not, some of the blocks aren't quite as big as up here, but you know, they were just, there's so much that's gone into the bedrock. Again, it's like, you know, you're talking about years of planning and years of construction just to do that part of it. Like, it's insane. And you can see the slope of the rock, right? This was the original slope of the hill where it's been carved in on the back here. And we'll come back around on the other side. I do want to, we're going to come back to this area. We'll finish over here because this is very interesting as a quarry. The one other thing I wanted to point out really quickly, we're going to see a lot of, is that this pyramid's unique in that the bottom 2 layers were cased in granite, and you actually have granite casing stones, and the 2 courses were all granite, which is just, I don't know how many thousands, if not millions of tons of granite that was shipped up here, and very finely worked. It's astonishing, and we're going to where is it? We're going to go back. I think let's go. Yeah, we'll go. So you see the floor tiles. We'll come back, and then we'll come back to the quarrying.
That must have looked amazing, you know, if the rest of it's cased in the Tura limestone. And you've got this bottom layer of dark granite, so that it's like a what would you call it? It's like an accent line going all the way around the base, and it's bright all the way up. Man, that must have looked amazing.
Oh, I would have loved to see it.
Yeah, get that time machine. That's Giza's.
But I can look at that little section of granite casing stones you were showing there and see that they had to put those down before they put anything on top of them, because there's 3 behind the one out in the front.
Yeah,
or 2 behind it, so you couldn't slide those up underneath higher stones. They would had to have been put down first.
Indeed.
Yeah.
There's obviously they built that up that way on the ground, and you got to imagine, I guess it was a continuous join. And we're going to see, so this is, and what you see here is just purely the rubble left over from quarrying. And there's 2, as we walk around, there's a couple things to look at. One that I like to point out is we'll see a few just down here a little bit, but some of the blocks in the pyramid structure itself are gigantic. They're huge and much bigger than any of the other pyramids, just the limestone blocks. And we'll see some of them. There's definitely, I just call it like more megalithic. And the other thing that I get asked about a lot, and you'll see it in all of these stones, are these marks here, these dashed lines. Okay, so this is.
I noticed that in the grooves in the previous video you were just showing.
That's quarrying. That is how This not how the ancient Egyptians, according to the ancient Egyptians, didn't do it this way. They hammered it out with pounding stones, apparently. Nonsense. But this is how it's been done pretty much ever since. and all of the quarrying work that was done here is done that way. So what happens is you take an iron chisel and you dig yourself a groove in the stone, and you dig a series of those grooves, you pack wood into it, you wet the wood swells, and you hope to split the block in a relatively straight line. So you see that absolutely everywhere, and that's not Egyptian, that's not anything except for quarrying. That is some of it may be Egyptian, like later period Egyptian quarrying, but that's how it's done. And they did that because they wanted to use the flat faces of the beautiful stone that was, that had been done by the dynastic Egyptians or by the builder culture. They were trying to quarry these stones to take away those flat, nice surfaces to then use in other constructions, because they wouldn't have to, use it themselves. So that's why this stuff got quarried, because it was so flat, so perfect. People wanted that. They would try and take pieces of these stone to use in other construction. We see it everywhere.
It makes me angry. I have to say. Yeah. I just get mad when I think about it.
And I can. Yeah. I'm also seeing the sort of heterogeneous nature of the paving stones out there. The way that they're all different shapes and sizes. That's cool.
Indeed.
So are you guys standing up on more tiles, or is that bedrock platform?
No, this is all still foundation and tiles. In fact, this is right on the edge. And see, this is also kind of interesting. Check this out. It's like there's a granite block intermixed with the limestone. See this? Yeah. In this course here, the granite block goes back a little further. Now, it wasn't all even. I don't know why they did this, but there's definitely different areas.
Locks it into place. Yeah.
Yeah, and
it definitely is like this very regular stair stepping at the base there, and then it gets all jumbled up top. But you can imagine during the building of the thing, you would continue the courses in that manner. So you'd have a very regular structure to be supporting materials that you're bringing up as you're building it. And then I guess the last part, which is the confusing part, is casing it, because it gets smooth. And like Russ was saying, if you did it from the bottom,
be very difficult.
Where is your support structure after that? Like, how are you? I mean, you'd have to build something that's leaning up against this perfectly flat, smooth thing, and then be bringing up these giant stones that weigh multiple tons to.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's hard to imagine. So
it's a lot of scaffolding.
That's a very giant block. Yeah, that's
a
huge megalithic block right there.
Yeah, and this is the biggest blocks in any pyramid construction I've seen. Like massive blocks in these early courses. Yeah, and again, it's like it's not the precision of it's not all perfectly finely fitted, even though it's been shaken around with earthquakes and whatnot. It definitely got rougher as they went up. There's some gaps. They didn't use mortar, I don't believe, on this pyramid. There's Brian sort of demonstrating how big it is. We saw Jimmy up there a minute ago. But yeah, this is why I call this megalithic, like more megalithic. It's bigger. Bigger blocks of limestone in some of these courses. And just why go to the effort of these huge pieces of stone?
It'd be interesting too, like how far up do they go? Is it just these first 3 courses, or?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know how far in they go. I don't know if anyone's.
Yeah.
I don't know how we'd tell.
I mean, yes. What I'm thinking about is once again like repurposing or, later building stages where you have this foundation that's built that has these chambers down below, and it has some purpose, and then later they come along and build the actual pyramid structure on top of this foundation.
Yeah, I think Graham Hancock has mentioned that he thinks that there may have been these big giant platforms that are made out of those megalithic blocks, and then later on people came and sort of started building the rest of the pyramid on top of it. But those first couple of courses constitute like a platform.
There you go. Yeah, that's a great idea. That makes sense. It does.
Your building phases in South America, right? You got these megalithic foundations, and then there's later cultures stack smaller rocks up on top of them.
Yeah. I mean, I'm fairly convinced that there were multiple periods of building going on here. Like, I think for sure that there was work done in disparate periods on these structures. But yeah,
the ancient text says that there's 3 different periods that go way back before the first dynasty. There's the first period where the Neteru, the gods, so-called, came to Egypt, started that civilization. Then the Shemsu Hor, a period that is pre-dynastic. There's definitely 3 periods of history that, and some say, though, well, that's just a kind of a mythology story. But when you see like 3 different periods of building, don't you have to take those into consideration?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a great point. The Shemsu Hall that follows with Horus. And I love some of these casing stones that are left. Just such precise work. Brilliant. And just the rubble that's left from this.
It's infuriating.
And you can see a pretty straight line. I mean, where those megalithic blocks go up, it just boom.
Yep.
There's a nice defined line all the way
Could
down
have
the
been
side
a platform. You might be right. Yeah, it's just like, and you get the underground, the platform, the rest of the pyramid. Maybe.
Yeah. Yep.
There's your 3 periods. Yeah, and that's I talked about that a few times. The whole the Zep Tepi, and the Neteru, and then the Shemsu Hall. And that's, that is what they considered their history, and it's this arbitrary decision in today's time to kind of determine what's myth and what's reality.
Yeah. The problem with the Neteru, and that just comes from the word netter, which means the gods.
That's right.
The problem with that is they say, that's the period of the gods, and then people think gods. Okay, that's mythological.
Myth. Yeah.
But gods just meant highly enlightened humans, very sophisticated. That's all that was meant by that term.
Yeah, and it's a funny parallel too with you have a similar, the Shemsu Hora talked about a bit that way as well, as being advanced and enlightened. And then you go to South America, which again is, and we haven't even talked about, South America is a possibility for these sort of swap casts as well.
Absolutely.
You have the whole Viracocha legends where they, talked about them being able to move boats that made snakes of the water and didn't have sails. It's like describing a wake.
Right.
And they had boats.
I was talking to Brian Forster last week about this, but about the Inca and where they built. But they were just like the Egyptians. In order for them to be kind of regarded by history, you had to build your monument or your temple on top of something that came before from the gods. That is like written in stone almost, that you had to build on top of previous ruins to be attached to the mythology and the whole history of your country and your culture.
Yeah, you find it sacred, you find it profound, and then you attach your culture to it. And that's some ways we do it today. In the same way, we find these sites profound and sacred, and the Egyptian culture kind of attaches itself to it. They're very proud of all of this, and rightfully so. It makes sense, right? It's human nature. And the dynastics here were here for thousands of years, so they had a lot of time to attach themselves to this stuff, I think.
Right, exactly.
All right, let's.
It's also interesting. I've been thinking about this, just the concept of these, for example, the statues being much older that are inherited, and yet you see this style in the hieroglyphs in the tombs, like they definitely. So like the headdress, everything, the way that that if that's what happened, it's really interesting how they ended up trying to look like those statues, right? That would be basically what happening.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, and that's the same direction I go with it. I think there was imitation going on, and in fact, I'm working on a video about Saqqara and the vases and where I think a lot of that started for the dynastic Egyptians, but. Yes, and given when you look at their history and what they describe happened here, and them describing themselves as a legacy civilization, I don't think it was just statues and that they inherited. It seems to me that they inherited parts of the culture, and it's kind of becomes difficult to separate the dynastic Egyptians from the builder culture, if you want to call them that. I think it's possible that they inherited objects as well as some knowledge and culture. I mean, maybe the religion that came from them. Maybe a lot of their culture may have come from that. It doesn't seem to me that if you consider these things to be functional or activated, it doesn't seem like they had that. They lost that, and I think a lot of that may have then been represented ceremonially throughout their culture. Like they use these places for that to try and reenact that. And yeah, that's why I think people look at it. Well, isn't that Ramses? Isn't that what they look like? Well, they definitely modeled themselves after that. I think it's a possibility. I don't. It's hard to say for sure. Interesting discoloration on the stone here that was part of the casing block, and you see damage on some of these casing blocks too, just to tie it back into the video footage. But yeah, I definitely think there's a case to be made that. That we should maybe believe what the Egyptians said about themselves, which is they're a legacy culture from those who came before. And, that's...
Yeah, so you're right. I stated it too simply. It's more complicated than they found these statues and structures in the desert and then tried to look like them. They inherited a lot more than that.
Yeah.
But it's just interesting to me that, I've been thinking about it, like, what... I mean, these are impossible to answer questions, but, did the people that carved those statues, did they look like that? Or were the statues fully symbolic all the way, or did they have the same sort of head dressing,
Great question.
I don't know.
Yeah. The only point I come down is like I make arguments where I sort of suggest, I think there's arguments to be made about the boxes and maybe even the pyramid structures themselves being functional somehow in the past. You can't really say that about the statues. The statues definitely, that's artwork. Like maybe it is ceremonial, maybe it is a representation of the gods, of their gods, and it's something that was inherited. I don't know.
But then again, there are texts where they say that the statues would nod.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
God. Okay.
They participated in the temple. I mean, this is a priest saying, yes, the statue nodded in agreement with everything I just said. I don't know if that's really what happens, but it's definitely in the writings.
This is the money shot. So we finally got ourselves down to what I think is the southwestern corner. You can see the bed.
And that video is like all this time we've been talking, he's been walking along one side.
Yeah, it's a big structure. It takes... Yeah,
that's awesome, man. That's really great. Sorry,
definitely worth walking around. So, what to point out here is that so you see the natural slope of the bedrock. This is, I think, at its maximum heights, like 10 or 11 meters, 30 something feet, maybe a little more. And it's been carved down. They've carved all this out, and then you see right on this corner where they've shaped a whole bunch of this pyramid out of bedrock. Like they built it. It's been hacked back up out of bedrock. And you see it quite clearly here.
It's stair step, just like the block courses.
The courses are built, so the whole thing locks in. It's all a level structure, but a lot of people don't realize that, there's parts of this are literally formed back up from the bedrock. So I think it's got to put to rest the idea that, the pyramid builders were making it up as they went along and they made mistakes and they changed their plans on the fly. I mean, come on.
There you go. Yeah. Good point. You can't, well, I mean, I guess you could repair with blocks if you cut too much, but yeah. I mean, they clearly cut the same stair-step pattern that they made in megaliths on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're going to case it in a different stone, then you would need it to be a structure that can hold those casings.
Right.
But yeah, that's really cool.
I made a video on that corner of that pyramid right there about 3 years ago, but that was remarkable to me that is actually the natural mound coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And then they just locked the pyramid into that corner. That's just amazing technology to me, and something that I just never even considered until, just did some investigating. And I know Matt did a video on that too.
Yeah.
And we do not build stuff like that. I mean,
no,
that is a really difficult thing to do in terms of building. I mean, if you don't start with a flat foundation,
right.
That's just, that just makes the job that much more difficult.
It's hard for me to believe that whole thing is solid. I just, maybe I just don't have the right. I mean, obviously, I don't know the minds of builders, but it's hard for me to have watched this video of you walking down the side of it and all this stuff and looking how they and then just it's just a pile. It's a triangular shaped pile of rocks. I don't think so. There's
primitive people.
in there.
Yeah, there's got to be stuff in there too. Yeah, you're right. It does. It's the mountain in the west. There you go. Right. Yeah. So let me set up this last little clip here. So what we did, this is actually from this far corner here. So I think this is southwestern. I'm sure someone's going to go, you got this completely backwards, but I think this is southwestern corner. and this is the northwestern corner. And the next footage is going to be from this northwestern corner, basically on the side where the entrance is. And we're kicking around. So looking down now, the north side here, there's the entrance. And you can see the wall here. So, and I will make one mention about this wall. It's eroded. There's passageways, and there's shafts dug into it. There's all sorts of things. It's a whole other topic. But what is interesting in this corner that I like to point out is this is a quarry. I pointed this out with my comments about geopolymers, but this is where they'd cut limestone blocks out of this hole that they dug, and they used it in pyramid construction or wherever. Right? There's still blocks that you can see where they've been cut from their shapes from the ground here, and then there's actually an inscription on the wall here, and maybe we can hear some of this. It's a hieroglyphic inscription. Yeah, it's hard to hear, Yusuf. I'll mention it. So this is a report. This basically says that the quarry master was here to quarry the stone for Ramses II, and he used them to build a temple in Heliopolis. And we're not talking about limestone. This was a granite quarry, and they were quarrying the pyramid. So,
oh my gosh,
yeah,
wow.
This was Ramses actually taking stone from here, quarrying, and the record of the quarry master that was the overseer of the quarry was doing this for Ramses, and so yeah, this was happening in the 19th dynasty. So, and then I think some of the other reports I've read about this pyramid is that it may have been looted or started. Some of this may have been happening as early as the first intermediary period, sort of after the Old Kingdom. So it didn't take, it wasn't very long into that civilization before they started kind of looting. And
just to be clear, that writing on that wall is saying that they were quarrying the pyramid. That's okay.
Yeah. And it was a granite quarry. They didn't need the limestone from here. They were taking the granite, which was Ramses. I've talked about in a few videos. He did that quite a bit, and notoriously, as Petrie liked to say, he was the great usurper. He usurped a lot of these monuments. He would carve his name over the name of previous kings. His son would do that as well. What's his son's name? It's an M, I think. Yeah. No. There was a number of pharaohs in the 19th dynasty where this became a pretty firm practice, and it's kind of but today we call him Ramses the Great. Everything's for Ramses. All these statues are Ramses. All these monuments are Ramses. He was just very good at taking and renaming a lot of monuments. And it's weird that that's the accepted paradigm, because even in Petrie's day, they were pointing this out. They were like, look, there's other names that we can determine underneath these hieroglyphs or in these other spots that are from older dynasties. How can you say this was created for Ramses? Now, no doubt he was a very powerful guy. Egypt was at a height during him. He probably had a lot of work done, but still, I think a lot of the stuff that is attributed to him is just him, hijacking it from older times.
Writing his name on older stuff.
Yeah.
There was a number of Ramses.
Yes, there were. Yeah. Ramses the Sixth. This is Ramses the Second I'm talking about specifically. Merenptah. His son was Merenptah.
Very tall wall to the right there.
Yeah.
You guys are walking. Yeah, that's very high.
Skip past this just so we're not exactly sure where this is, because I don't really want to give everything away. In terms of where to go and find stuff that's interesting. I love the Yusuf's look here.
Oh yeah.
So it's a diorite pounder. These things tend to disappear from places like this. So this is one of the apparently quarrying devices that were used to shape the stone. That was how they made everything.
Yeah, sure.
This is all you need to do to make a structure like this, or to get your granite looking like that, is you just need one of these and some time, and away you go.
High tech.
High tech, yep, pounding stones. There you go.
I also point out that wall in some places showed pretty heavy erosion.
Erosion.
As well.
Indeed, it does. Yeah, particularly on that western side.
That might have been flattened because they wanted to write on it, right? I don't
Right.
know, but
Yeah.
places it's very eroded.
Yeah, there's particularly, I think, on the western, sort of the southwestern side here.
Yeah, like that is.
Yeah. Yeah. I just love this angle on it too. It's just such a beautiful structure.
It is.
Yeah.
Well,
There's a lot-
Look at the hole they dug. We're standing in the hole that they dug. Like,
That's me talking.
Yeah.
We're standing in the hole they dug.
Is that a cave to the left there?
Oh yeah, yeah. In fact, definitely. In fact, I have plenty of footage of this is actually looking into some of these caves. So interesting shapes on the ceiling, right? So this is actually peeking into some of these in this wall. This is from a much earlier. This is 2016. Looking at this back wall, we sort of were poking around quite a bit. And there's caves. There's holes in the ground. There's shafts. I think in this room, I think the camera pans down and there's a shaft. It's been covered up in a bunch of scaffolding. There's a lot of stuff in here. They dug everywhere. Yeah, so this is keeping stuff. And I think over here you might see there's definitely a hole in the ground over here.
Yeah. What is up with that ceiling?
Isn't that interesting? And you start to look at like acoustics and start thinking in that direction. The resonant properties. And
I have a thought on the ceiling. I think that might represent. I think the ceiling might represent that wavy kind of pattern, just the cosmic ocean of the sky looking up from a tomb.
Yep,
that's
possibly.
my thought on that.
Oh yeah.
There's Luke, who was. I was running around the first pyramid. We were both filming. This was our last day on a trip in 2016. But yeah, so back it's the same. It's that western face of the pyramid, and then same footage we've kind of seen in the other film. Let me just see if there's anything looking at the wall here. Yeah, so here you go. It's a closer look at some of the erosion on the wall.
Yeah, that's severe erosion there.
Yeah, she's pockmarked.
Yeah, that's. Yeah, I don't know. It's like acidic water or something.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's eroded in a number of different ways. And then, as I said, shafts, chambers. I'm sure people were being buried and all sorts of things were dug all around this. It would have been a very sacred area, right? It would have been.
Right. Yeah.
This would have been the place, and I'm sure there was a priesthood that was probably running a business selling this sort of location. Who knows?
Be buried by the structures of the gods.
There's a nice descending passageway.
Yeah.
Buried near the mountain of the west. Yes.
Yeah.
one of those descending passageways filled up with trash, and dirt.
Man, can you imagine cutting that? I mean, that goes way down there. It's a small hole, very square.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you?
Yeah, it's a mystery. But that's the end of most of the footage I have. I do have plenty more just walking around the outside and staring up at it.
Well, that's great. Let's we could take a break, come back, and wrap it up.
Yeah, and I have some follow-up stuff from the show from last week.
Okay.
To do in some corrections on stuff that I said. So take a break and come back.
All right, and we're back for the final segment here, a wrap, and that was absolutely amazing. Again, Ben, I wanted to thank you very much for sharing all this with us.
Yes.
The footage is awesome, and it's a very unique look. You can't find that anywhere. I really appreciate your attention to detail with the videos and your knowledge and everything. I know all of our listeners appreciate it, so. I just want to say thanks for all that. It's great.
Absolutely.
Great stuff.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm happy to be able to share this. I think it's a good format. I think people, people like it. I saw a lot of comments from your viewers too in the comment sections on the video, so that's a bit of fun. I'm glad you guys like it. I think it works well. We got, and as I said, many more options to pick from to do more of these.
Yes.
There's other pyramids here. There's whole other pyramids. I think I mentioned earlier, South America. I mean, there's we could look at some of those sites too at some point. There's, a walk around Sacsayhuaman, for example, or even Cusco. That I think because it's all more or less the one thing merged together is just pretty spectacular. There's and there's lots of little details in all of those places too that you sort of miss with some of the I guess the shorter format things. It's a nice way to share raw footage and to get to look at like all the nitty gritty little details here and there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, cool.
So I had this habit of, when Kyle and I are doing our show, I always try to go back and review the after we publish it. I go back and listen to it and listen to the things that we brought up and think of new points or other ways I could say things. So I have a couple of things about that from the last show, just things that we were thinking about. But number one, and some people in your comments pointed this out, and they're totally right, that I was talking about thermoluminescence dating, and that maybe they could take some samples from the box that got blown up. That's totally wrong. Like, and I didn't even think about this during the show, but because they used dynamite, that would have zeroed it out.
Yeah.
Because that's a heat
Fair
event,
enough.
right? And that's what thermoluminescence or optically stimulated luminescence looks at, is low level thermal events, and dynamite is definitely qualifies.
Yeah.
it would have zeroed it out. So they would need to take a sample, and preferably you'd want a sample from a part of a box that couldn't have had a fire burned near it. I mean, I know there's no soot in there, but even if somebody held a torch next to one for a couple of minutes,
right,
you don't want to take a sample from that site. So the best thing to do would be to like lift one of the boxes up and get something out from underneath. But of course, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, that would be an ask. That would be an ask.
Yeah, that would be a task. I mean, they could probably go around behind one of them and get something, on a box that they're not worried about damaging. But yeah, definitely, I was completely wrong about using those fragments. So I wanted to point that out. And then the other thing, the last thing you showed us was that tiny little tunnel at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And Kyle and I were talking about it later, and I'm like, if they're doing that by hand with chisels and hammers, how did they even do that? Can you lay inside that tunnel and like hammer at the back end? Is it big enough to do that?
If you cleared the rubble out of there that's in there, I think you could get in there. Yeah, you'd have to crawl. It looks like a crawl space.
Crawling, not laying down. You could definitely be on your hands and knees.
I think so. Yeah, it looks, and I think I'd have to take a closer look at the wall there too. It seems to be bedrock.
Yeah.
But there's definitely, like Yusuf said, like they thought the Serapeum ended at one area and then somebody found it continued. So I guess they must have seen some built walls and gone through those, and there was definitely built walls. Like a lot of those boxes were actually bricked in. Like they were enclosed before when Marriott found them. They had to remove bricks and walls. But yeah, I think that looks like bedrock to me at the end of that wall. Like I don't think that's a constructed wall. So yeah, whatever's in there or however they did that, it seems to be. Yeah, that was if it was done by hand, it was done painfully, and some people crawling into this space.
It seems that at one period in history, somebody had an amazing ability just to slice through the bedrock.
Yes.
You see it at Zayed Al Aryan, Abu Ruwash.
Yep.
And it's very unique, and you go in there and then you just stop and think, well, how did they do this, or why did they do this way? Yeah. And I just think people back then just thought entirely different than we do today, and that's why we can't figure this shit out.
Yeah. It's a good point. Yeah, I like to say that whoever you are seeing a clearly obvious mastery in stone. Like they had a way of working in this medium that seems to be easier than we find it today. It's not personal incredulity. It's they were obviously work. I mean, it's not just how much effort you put in. Like they seem to have had an ability to work in this medium that was easier than we find it, and however that is, I think some of those answers may sit outside of our current perspective, which is why I keep saying that we should investigate. We should, we should be open-minded in how we look at this stuff, because you never know, we might stand to learn something. Like it's this idea that everything that was done in the past must fit within the lens of our perspective because we're superior and we know, everything that they know and then some. Like it's okay. I think we certainly don't know everything about the universe. We're continuing to expand on our own knowledge all the time and make new discoveries. And you got to imagine in 100 or 1,000 years, we'll know an awful lot more about the nature of things and the matter around us. But I think some of these answers may lie in those spaces that we don't know yet.
Yep.
But
even you can imagine even in 100 years.
I really think
we
we need to be open-minded to a history that is an alternative of the Egyptologists. The Egyptologists know a heck of a lot about the history, but their refusal to budge on a history that goes back before the first dynasty is just, it's stubborn and just not very cool for the people who are looking for the truth.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree with that too.
And there's literally hard evidence for some of that as well. I think I mentioned this when we recorded with Randall, but there was it has, I don't think that's come out yet, but that there is literally some of those stone jars that they attribute back to even the very first dynasties, the really perfect stone jars. And this is on record. This is establishment fact in the Nubian Museum. There's an example of where they found some stone jars on sites that they had carbon dated to 12 to 15,000 years old, like well and truly before the Egyptian dynasty. They've found jars and some of these objects in sites that are way before the dynastic Egyptians, but it doesn't seem to make an impact on that fixed story of history, as you say, the sort of Orthodox version. And it's, the other example I like to use is Göbekli Tepe. It's just like instead of moving back the date of civilization for humanity, which is really what that site I think represents, we just changed the definition of what it meant to be a hunter-gatherer. And now it's just like, well, no, that site was done by hunter-gatherers. They just like to play around on weekends. And I'm like, come on, is it that hard to shift away from established ideas? I guess that's the politics of a lot of science, I guess. And this is, it comes back to the problem of Egyptology and archaeology. In some ways, it's less of a science and more of an art. And it's the nature of establishments itself is to resist change, and when your position of power in an establishment at a university, in the ivory tower as an academic, derives from your expertise over this story, I think you defend that story. It's almost, and they often accuse the alternative space of being like a religion, but I think it's a case of you're describing how you're behaving yourself. It's more like Egyptology, and the Orthodox story is something of a religion. It has its priests that defend the doctrine of it, and when you attack the doctrine, you're attacking them directly, which is why we just seem to have a lack of real debate and real dialogue on this, because you can't do experiments and there's no real hard sort of scientific process to follow. It's an interpretation of all this loose data, and ultimately that's all it is. That's the points we were making about how these pyramids are attributed to these pharaohs. It's kind of this loose, loosey-goosey sort of relationship.
Yep.
It's not hard fact. It's an interpretation. It's one interpretation. And also throw in there the last point I'll make is that I don't want to discredit Egyptology and all that either. I think they've done a wonderful job, and they know they focus a lot on the daily life and how the dynastic civilization was structured and how and its history and how it ran. And I think all of that's legitimate. Like that's how that ran, but it doesn't preclude the notion that they inherited a lot of these objects. And it just flat out ignores a lot of the technological evidence for it. So,
yeah. And going back,
when I did my video series when I did my video series 3 years ago on every pyramid in Egypt, and I was kind of going to take the whole thing into context, there was at least 10 pyramids where they will give attribution due to a fragment of something found nearby in a little temple.
Yeah.
And then at least 10 of these pyramids, it says, but there is no consensus, no agreement, and the builder is basically unknown. But you still have that attribution that, and I would say about 15 of the total pyramids in Egypt, it's just guesswork and flimsy guesses.
Yeah.
I always thought that it was confirmed. These are these guys' pyramids. It's just guesses.
Yeah, you're right, and it's fragments of things. I mean, I saw the same thing with. This is getting kind of away from Egypt, but when I was really diving deep into the research about Baalbek and the platform there versus the Roman temple versus the Greek temples and all the other construction on top of that platform, and I was trying to find out why does what standard model archaeology, why does the mainstream attribute this entire structure to basically the Romans? What is the evidence here? And so I was reading the papers, There's one particular paper that everyone cites when they're like, this is the evidence that it was Romans. And I went and I actually read the whole paper, and basically what it came down to in that paper was, number one, a style similarity to deep interior stones in Jerusalem, the Temple Mount. Right, so deep interior stones in that have a slight stylistic similarity to some of the big giant stones at Baalbek at the platform, and they're like, well, Herod built that, so that's Roman, but they actually don't know that about that Temple Mount either. Those deep interior stones are not what Herod built. He built it outwards. But the other way they attributed it was they found one piece of block that had fallen from something that when they flipped it over, it had a fraction of graffito on it that attributed something to some Roman guy. And I'm like, okay, that's not even connected to the temple. It's the same thing, right? It's not even connected. It's a piece of graffiti. There's no way to tell if that was originally there from the structure or not. And those were the two pieces of evidence in that whole paper that everybody cites to say this platform was built by the Romans. So really, when you dig into the evidence, you find out
there was There was 18th dynasty pharaohs building at Baalbek. Unless the Romans inscribed 18th dynasty pharaohs into some of that stonework there.
Yeah, there you go.
I didn't know that.
I mean, Amenhotep. See, back in about 3,400 years ago, the boundary of what we know, what we call Egypt, and that's just based on a Greek word. So what did they call it before that? Yeah. But what we know is Egypt extended all the way from Sudan all the way up into Lebanon at that time.
Oh, yeah.
And the pharaohs about 3,400 years ago were putting in their temples in their northern territory, and that was at Baalbek. So there was something obviously there before the pharaohs.
Yes.
Yeah. And certainly before the Romans in that case, right?
Right. Yeah.
Well and truly.
The Romans built the Romans built their temple at Baalbek for one specific purpose, and I'll be going into that in a video in a few weeks.
All right.
Cool. Yeah. Look forward to that. Yeah. There you go. Got to throw a teaser.
That'll be a shrouded in mystery video.
Oh, good. Shrouded in mystery video. Yeah.
Shrouded in mystery. Can't wait.
Good stuff.
Baalbek has a fascinating history.
Doesn't it? Yeah. I tried to get there. Couldn't make it on this. Just too much, uncertainty, and it's become less safe than it once was, I think. And maybe in the future, it's one of those places I got to see at some point.
Yes, that's definitely on my list for sure.
I'll bet. Yeah.
Well, hopefully it doesn't go anywhere. So.
Yeah, it hasn't gone on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, unless there's anything else, I have to say this has been another fantastic one. Looking forward to more.
No, I'm good. Yeah, no, thanks for doing it. Thanks for coming along, Chuck, too. It's been it's always great to get your perspective, mate.
Oh, it's been fun.
Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome.
I have no problem blabbing about history whenever.
Indeed. All right. Well, we'll probably do it again.
Well, thanks a lot, and good night.
Good night.
Cheers.